going to sew the collar to the body of the shirt now. And I've done a line here where this top collar folds back. If I sew along that line when I sew it to the body, then I know that this folded back part will cover the stitching. Because we've got a circle, a very curved neck, and our collar is less so, having too many pins actually works against you. But I am going to pin it at the beginning, which is our centre front. Remember what your seam allowance was here. Was it a centimetre? Was it 0.6? Mine is a centimetre. And what you want to do is make sure that you match up your shoulder seams as you're coming around. You can keep moving the fabric around and making sure that these edges match up. So you don't want it to go over or come this way. You want those edges to still match up. But you can stop at any point in time. Keep stopping and starting again and repositioning. Now I'm not sewing that folded part down yet. But I am going to sew down both ends here. If you have a 0.6 seam allowance here, 6mm seam allowance, you probably won't need to snip or grade this seam here. Because I've got a centimetre, I'm going to have to snip all the way through. So what's going to happen here is that the seam allowance is going to get sandwiched in between the facing and the front bodice, and then it's going to go in between the two layers of collar at the back. So we're just going to sew that together, and you're going to do that from where your snip was, 2 centimetres forward of your shoulder seam. I've pre-snipped my facing, but you can actually do that later. And if you do it from this side, you can see where your original line was. and you're sewing up to that snip, so make sure you know where that is. And we're going to turn it through. Because it's a right angle, you shouldn't need to trim all this off. You can just fold, fold, and push it through. Do that on the other side. Fold, fold, and push it through. If these corners are a bit too bulky, then you can always use the clapper or the handle of a screwdriver. Just give them a bit of a flatten like that. And do your quality control. So put one of these on top of the other. Make sure they match. Make sure that all that matches. And then we're going to do the final sewing. So if you haven't pre-snipped it, or maybe it's moved a little bit and you need to redo it, then you snip that facing up to where you've sewn. And then you're going to tuck it under and into here. Make sure everything's nice and flat. And then do that on the other side too. I've just pre-done that one. And then you're going to sew edge stitch along the edge of this collar here, from where you started before. So flatten this down nicely. It should really come right up to where your seam allowance is there. You might need to re-snip it to get this to lie flat. So if you didn't sew this line before, you'll just have one line here. And there's just one final thing to do before you iron, which is to sew down this little piece of flapping facing here. So there's a couple of different ways you can do it. You can just do a quick back and forward. On your actual seam. That will hold it down. But I like to actually just sew the seam allowance to the seam allowance. It's a little bit more fiddly, but then you don't see it on the outside anywhere. Give it all a final press. If your sewing is a little bit wobbly here, it's not such an issue because you can't see that once the collar is folded down. And let's go to the iron and give it a final press. The reason it's called a convertible collar is because you can have it done right up to the neck, or you can open it out and see that facing.